Mythic raiding in Dragonflight has to be some of the best moments for my guild because we were finally able to achieve cutting edge. I never knew there was endgame content in World of Warcraft like this until Shadowlands. I knew that there were raids a long time ago when I first started playing, but didn't realize how much of a behemoth-like thing that they turned into. These bosses in OG Classic used to last like 20 seconds and were significantly easier to complete. Now some bosses are 10 minutes or longer, leaving you to devote your soul for a brief moment of time. I never raided until recently, but I tried PvP a good amount, but I was never able to get good at that. I was more of a level guy. I like to make new characters to spend my time leveling because that's what I had fun doing. I legit used to think that's all WoW was. I mean, it kind of was until they started to center it around the endgame stuff. Anyway, I wish I did raid throughout the years and I'm kind of disappointed I never tried. It feels like I missed out on a lot of fun content throughout the years. I just don't think I really knew it existed and tried to find a guild to raid. I didn't even know that they had patch cycles within the years that updated classes like introduced new raids and stuff. I just thought buying the expansion was the only form of new content. I was too young and never had anyone tell me that this was the true form of endgame PvE. I used to play with some friends, but they only PvP'd. I used to love running dungeons. I'll never forget that one season that had Valor gear, where you get points from doing dungeons to buy your gear, and it had pretty cool transmog, and I don't know why they stopped doing that. The system was really good. I have a lot of opinions on the gearing system now, but I could save that for another video as well as subscriptions. I probably would have eventually discovered raiding if I could have played more, but I was only a kid. I had to ask my parents to buy me the game itself with a monthly sub. I've always wished it was a free game, but that's another thing. And back to the main topic. With raiding, they had normal and they introduced heroic difficulty. There were also different versions of raiding depending on the size of the party you would enter with. With Warlords of Draenor, they added a new difficulty called Mythic, which was supposed to be the hardest PvE content in the game. A lot of people took this by storm and thus created a race to the world first to be the fastest guild to complete the raid, and a lot of guilds spent time completing Mythic raids in general. Most guilds were competitive, where some were casual, ranging from 2 to 5 nights a week. The reason why I mentioned this stuff, I did not Mythic raid until Shadowlands or know of it. I do not know how hard raiding was or how long it took in each patch. All I know is that it got progressively longer and harder as the years went on since vanilla. To a point, I think raiding is outdated. I'm trying to not go into too much backstory, but I loved Castle Nathria for being my first raid. Bosses down to some mechanics were really fun. My guild got stuck on Sludgefist and we could have kept going, but we started late in the tier, so we ended up stopping. I turbo grinded Heroic Raid at the time while playing Destruction Lock, which did no DPS, and finished the raid before my guild did. I was trying to be helpful and mention stuff when they took me for the guild runs, and the guild master at the time wasn't happy. I was trying to help with calls and strats and watch this man keep dying on Sire. I was like, dude, I'll tank, it's okay, but he never wanted to stop. I ended up tanking, we got far and just downed the boss. 1 week later, he mental booms because he wasn't able to tank and deletes the guild and we reform. Then came Sanctum of Domination. Looking back, some of the bosses were good. I loved Terragu for how much of a meme boss fight this was. Sylvanas was a really good mythic fight as well, but she took 10 plus minutes to kill. The other bosses within here had some annoying one-shot mechanics that caused wipes and it pissed me off so much. We stopped on Painsmith. World First guilds like to spend the days of a new patch launch clearing the raid by playing every day. The last raid of this tier was the worst ever. It took them 18 days to finish this raid of playing 12 plus hours each day. They were legit in jail trying to finish off the jailer. I really think the raid should be able to be finished in 1 week of release. We ended up downing Halandris and then stopped because we didn't have time to finish the raid. Now we finally get to Dragonflight. I want to go over some of my thoughts up until this point. You guys know my experience and what it was like for me. For a little more information of my guild, we only raid 2 nights a week for a total of 4 hours, so we're pretty casual. We're all average players, nothing crazy. Comparing this to how people used to raid, I am surprised that we even managed to pull off getting cutting edge. It was a great feeling, and it also saddens me because we lost a couple of good players over the years because they wanted to take a break. And I'm starting to wonder if I should do the same thing. Like, why do I even mythic raid? Is 2 nights a week really viable, and is committing more time to mythic raiding worth it? Let's start by analyzing the enjoyment out of this expansion. Quick note, if you want to look at my stuff, I played Avdol, Mellow Lizard, and Mellow Laser. If you want to check out anything of mine, I'm a pretty decent player who occasionally does really well. First off, we have Vault of the Incarnates. I think this was a top tier raid and was the best of the 3. A lot of the bosses were interesting and the raid was surprisingly short. It took us a total of 430 pulls across all bosses, which is on par with being on the better side of the average pull count. I want to make a quick note. Some people have 800 pulls on one boss in a later tier. My entire raid took us around 400. I will say, being a guild that raids less means we will see a lot of the nerfs by the time we get to the bosses. The average completion time for this raid was between 50 and 60 hours, which isn't that much time. Here is my tier list of the bosses that I enjoyed with difficulty in mind. I think Razgaz was the best fight in the raid. I want to mention that it sucks for the race of World First people because they randomly shot out a nerf in P3 for the holidays to make the fight easier. I think this nerf was needed, but the time it was released messed with some guilds. The wind mechanic was truly too harsh. I can't believe they made a boss where it's physically impossible for some classes to outrun the winds. In its nerf state, it was a lot better to deal with. After all the tuning, I really liked progging this boss. It felt like you were able to see yourself progressing smoothly with pull count with each phase. P1 is cool, intermission had ads to deal with, then a shield to break. P3 was supposed to be intense, but with how long the fight took, I'm okay that it was nerfed to be easy. Imagine if P3 was difficult, you pull the boss for 10 minutes, then you prog P3, which is 10 minutes deep for 100 pulls. That's not appealing at all. Airnog was great because it had ads to burst down, and I think roaming firewall was a cool DPS check. Very fun lineup for enhancement shamans on this fight. Spreading your flame shock and the lightning bolt felt really good on the ads. Broodkeeper was good and bad because it split the raid into two groups. You had your AoE people go on the ads and then single target stay on the boss. Some overlaps are pretty intense, and I like the idea of being able to select who went where and who was your designated egg breaker for the fight. Sucks that it was me, but you know, you gotta take one for the team sometimes. And imagine if it was RNG and went on anyone, then this boss could have been a nightmare. I know a lot of people would disagree, but I found Teros pretty boring. It was okay of a boss, not too hard, not too easy. There's nothing like crazy going on. Primal Council, just like any council, spams you with mechanics. I actually like this fight because it's a good constant 4-target cleave. The only thing that would have made it better is if they found a way to make the AoE lightning spread less chaotic. Imagine the play was everyone stacked on a pillar and it doesn't even spread to anyone, or maybe just doesn't spread but pulses big damage. The boss might have been mechanic overload, but even pugs were able to form up to down this because of how easy it was. I liked Kurog, but I think it was tuned a little bit too hard with the numbers. This boss had so many different mechanics and it would have been cool picking your own path, but you really only chose one. I would have liked to get the value out of all the abilities, but otherwise the fight is pretty good. Senorth kind of had the same problem. I like the introduction of this boss. It was very creative. If it was tuned to be easier boss fight with less pulls, I think it would have rose with the ranks. The last climb on the top of the stairs with the ice, spread circles, tornadoes was pure chaos. I feel like that is the major thing that breaks some bosses. I wish the developers kept that in mind. Some bosses spam mechanics with little wiggle room to counter them. I feel like it's easy to delay the mechanic by 2 seconds or make it do less damage to combat the overlap. Dathia, same thing, but way worse. The boss fight was cool, but not at all tuned properly. This was my least favorite boss to prog of the entire tier. It was a long fight, grouping the ads was a pain, knockback on the ads was horrible, spread circle caused some BS, and tornadoes pathing sometimes sucked. Overall, miserable experience, but I still think if a fight like this took less pulls to finish the boss, it wouldn't be so bad. All of it would take is proper tuning. I think the raid was pretty balanced by the time we got to most of them. The only real complaint here is Dathia. That boss was pure mess, and if they tuned it better, it would have been okay. We also had to pull in a lot of subs for the boss, which made it take longer. That was a recurring theme for our guild though, subs and finding players. Next we have Aberrus. This raid was actually very boring, and I generally disliked most of the bosses here. This raid was a bit longer than the previous one. It looks like maybe the average is around 67 hours with 714 pulls. This is a quick look at my tier list for this one. Rashok was the best boss of the raid. I think it could have got a little bit more of a nerf because later on in the phase he did a lot of damage. Other than that, the dodge, lava soak, and clear mechanics overall worked very well together. The only reason I didn't rank it an S is that you can get cooked on RNG sometimes. If the spawns for the circles you had to bust were the same every time, it would have made the fight a lot easier, but I get that's the point. Not sure what everyone's general opinion is, but I liked Sark. Once again, you can feel yourself progressing through the phases unless you're my guild and somehow wipe in P2. Other than that, it was a short fight that had a lot of overlaps to get used to. Once you learn them, you're able to down the boss. A lot of the boss was understanding movement and where to path and bait the mechanic. I think the worst thing was having 2 knockbacks out at a time, which could mess with some people. Also, the go down mechanics put a stacking dot on the raid. If this dot did less damage, then people can go down and clear stacks freely to make P3 a joke. It wasn't needed, but would have been huge for some classes and everyone in general to ignore mechanics with going down and getting haste for your cooldowns. For where Magmarax was, I think it was good. It wasn't overall difficult. Once you had everyone on the same page, you can use item level to shut that boss down. Amalgamation was okay. I think 2 different bosses and fusing them together was interesting. I was a warlock, so I AFK'd in the center of the room while I watched people just run back and forth. The rest of the raids sucked. Echo could have been better and needed a lot of nerfs to be a decent placement. Range were in complete despair, having to run across the entire area to bait certain mechanics. The amount of downtime I had to do for this one is part of the reason why I disliked it so much. If you were melee, this boss was basically free except when you AFK'd in the center to cast his AoE. Having 3 people on your team to be careful of targeting is also cool. Fun for trolling and heroic, but not so much for mythic. Thankfully, Assault was an easy tune to boss. I swear, if this boss took a lot of pulls, it would have made people mad, and it was very boring. Maybe if you had the ads spawn at the same time and 2 unique bosses leap from both sides and everything would run into the center to phase, I think this would have made it feel more like a boss than a trash pack. Having one-shot mechanic on the first boss is cruel, Kazara can rot, and I say that as someone who hates mechanics that can have one person wipe you. If the overlapping beam didn't nuke your raid, I think this boss would have been fine. People got lost so many times and never knew where to go. Skarn. I'm not even going to mention how BS this boss was. It was great that guilds found a way to cheese this one, but then Blizzard said, no, that's not allowed, do the boss normally. Then almost no guilds could kill it, so they turbo nerfed it. Prime example of overtuned and not fun. If people have to come up with a cheese strat, the boss should get nerfed, not hotfixed to be harder. In doing the later nerfs, there was a day where the boss didn't do one of their mythic mechanics. Luckily for us, we finished for a shock and was able to snag a quick kill on this boss when it was bugged. This boss was horribly designed and tuned. Last, we have Forgotten Experiments. As soon as we downed this boss, we were like, we're extending the lockout, which was good because the gearing system was so strong this season, so we didn't need to re-clear. I really like gearing being this good so you can lock earlier. This gives more time to clear the raid. I think it would have been fine if they tuned the dispels to not be punishing. Also, P3 was BS because the hitbox and the shield orb was not working properly. It would have been great if you had immunity classes to knock them far away, but we didn't really have that. Overall, Aberrus sucked and a lot of the mechanics rubbed me the wrong way. Now I'm currently still progging Amirdrassil, but I have the idea on the last 2. The average time in this one is around 75 hours, which is surprising because some of these bosses are generally easier than the other tiers. However, the last 2 were insanely strong. So I like Naimu the most. I think this had to be because it felt like it was the most balanced out of all the bosses. It was cool having 3 different groups have to go to the mythic ad area and destroy it within time. I think it was rough for range, but Melee had an easy time with this one. I would say Tindril is an S tier boss. Maybe in its nerfed version it is. We currently started progging this boss, so we'll see how it goes. Everyone said this was one of their favorites while wiping like 500 times to it, so something must be good. I think the seed mechanic was too harsh and should have been nerfed earlier, and I think everyone would agree with that. The fact that double soaking as a wipe is complete BS. Not only that, the damage output and the way to deal with the dispels could be quite frustrating as well. But I think this was a very unique fight, it just wasn't balanced correctly. I love that they made dragon riding feel impactful on a boss, soaring high to crush the roots, and then fly to the next platform while dodging the fireballs was a fun time. It just sucks that we don't raid more knights in my guild because it felt like freedom fighting this boss in a wide open area compared to Smolderon. I will admit, for the first 60 pulls I was enjoying this boss, however, we still can't consistently get a clean P1 at 100 pulls. I mean, this boss just takes a lot of progression, but wiping to the same thing that you've seen multiple times is a little bit tiring. Like, I don't mind the difficulty, but having 2 huge pull count bosses back to back is daunting. I think Tindril might be the hardest boss in the raid. I like that the best guilds in PTR thought this boss was going to be the easiest boss, and it turned out to be close to the hardest because Blizzard said not gonna happen. Next is for Rock. I generally really like this fight. I think the concept of every mechanic is really good, but it just wasn't tuned to be easy. Before the recent nerfs, people had to rescue adds to the tree just so you wouldn't wipe. Having 8 corrupted seeds in the final intermission that caused a lot of damage and chaos with the tornadoes was a pain. P3 seeds were a cool idea, but it's so much pressure on these players to dodge and live. I think the ads spawn way too far out and will take a while to get used to grouping them up in the center. The healer dispel came out too often as well, especially in intermission. People had to use a weak aura to work around the boss because the mechanic was tuned to be impossible. It's worse that Blizzard is doing private auras just because they don't want to see people using them, but like, you can't really do a mechanic normally. After a lot of nerfs, I think this boss might be more in line. I'm not looking forward to Prog P2. I think that face still seems annoying, but we'll see how it goes. Smolderon is B because I didn't like the personal responsibility of other people. I think if the tornado lines showed earlier, it would have made it easier. The nerf to the soak orb really helped. Just the way the balls spawned in the intermission bothered me as well. Sometimes you had a good spawn and can suck them all up and do high damage, while other times you'd have to AFK and wait for the opportunity to grab them. But realistically, this was the same fight to the end. Nothing changed, just 4 phases of praying someone doesn't spawn a tornado that will take someone out. Also, a side note on mechanics, I get Blizzard dislikes weak auras, but once again, private auras are not a way to deal with it. If a mechanic is too hard to do during the heat of the moment, players need to be given something to deal with it, or it has to be nerfed. Or just don't implement it at all. Gnaw root was okay for the first boss. Cool damage amp window that only worked for some classes, then lots of ad pad. I think the only thing that really bothered me on this one was people being targeted with giant swirlies that they had to run out. I think the size of them was just a little bit too big. Bulk Rush was cool, kind of like Smolder Run. Same thing all the way through and pretty easy. I never was able to get a good parse in this one because for some reason my group I was in kept nuking me with the circle, but you know, it happens. Council of Dreams, I don't think this was bad as people said. I did play Boomkin, so I did have full uptime on 3 bosses with Starfall. It definitely didn't feel good for parse if you got marked with a duck or your target randomly blinked away. Other than that, I feel like this fight wasn't chaotic compared to other council fights. All you had to do was let 2 people become ducks and have them eat green puddles, and it makes the fight pretty easy. It sucks for parsing this boss for sure, and damage in general, but it's a free boss in the raid. Aberrus just had way too much health, and I like the idea of selecting which weapon. The only problem here is that the boss did their spear mechanic way too often, and I think if it did it less, the boss would have been 10 times more enjoyable. It was literally just Spear Simulator where you spawn spears and just nuke them down. Not a lot of fun to be had there. Last we have Lorador, and this was the worst boss in the raid by far. I didn't like any second of progress in this boss. It's not that the mechanics weren't interesting, because they were. It's like all bosses, I feel like. If a boss is tuned properly, it would be more enjoyable. The way to activate and use the hose mechanic was the worst design possible. I like the idea of 3 people doing this, but in reality, when you try to execute this, it's annoying as hell. I think if this boss phased on time or P2 was easier so you can hero with pot on pull to push faster, it wouldn't be a problem. If you only got 2 sets of hose groups, it would have been fine as well, or if maybe the hose was a super blaster that you could activate and you could actually feel yourself quickly clearing the area. The way you had to hose the branches to get them to stop was cool, but at the same time it was a pain to get control of the roots sometimes because they spawn and chase some random person. I don't know. I can really talk about every boss and every mechanic down to the bone, but that would take forever. If you want to know my specific thoughts on anything, you can comment down below and I'll try to answer it. I just wanted to give a base idea on how I felt about raiding. Please comment your thoughts on raiding or other WoW systems as well. I think this is more of a video of is raiding too much of a time commitment for what it is. I swear I used to hear a couple of streamers sound actually miserable when they had to go prog for rock. It's like they were doing it just to do it, but not because it was fun. But isn't that the point of mythic raiding? Like, shouldn't it be fun, not take too long, and not be too complicated? But before I go into the other stuff, Dragonflight raiding as a whole has felt pretty good. I'm happy my guild was able to get cutting edge, and I hope that we can get this tier as well. Vault was really balanced besides Dathia. Aberrus kind of sucked, but Amirdrassil was okay. But did I really enjoy all these raids to the end? I think the heroic version of most bosses was pretty good, and they normally are tuned properly for most guilds to complete. While I enjoyed getting cutting edge and progging some bosses, there was also a factor of countless hours spent on raid nights with bosses who have extreme mechanic overlap. It's just that ruins the motivation to play. There's just a couple things that are left in my mind that make me think about continue playing the game. Is this just what WoW is? Like 80 hours of the same content? I feel like the only reason some bosses are this difficult is to keep the player playing WoW longer because it's a subscription-based game and Blizzard wants money. If people were to clear it too fast, then people wouldn't want to play. Same thing with gearing. But just because something is 80 hours of content doesn't mean it's good content. I'm going to be enjoying more than probably 30 hours of it. First, I want to talk about pugging the raid. Normal version of the raids have always been very easy, not much to mention here. Heroic version of all these raids were hard within the first couple of weeks, but became decently easy once everyone got gear and you're able to complete them pretty fast. Quick side note, no end boss should be like the Jailer again. An insanely hard boss with no rewards is trash, so guilds didn't even bother doing it. Anyway, we usually have alt raid nights where some people bring alts or mains and we crush the entire raid, and for the most part it's usually a fun time to breeze through in an hour or so. Also wish that mythic raid lockouts work like heroic, that way it was easier to pug, even though pugging kind of would be a nightmare for mythic. There's also a flip side to it which I've seen increase over the years, and that lies within pugging the raid if you have a lot of alts or your guild stops reclearing. Sometimes it's really hard to find a good group. There used to be the whole AOTC group thing people used to do, what these groups used to say, hey, this is going to be a good group and we're going to one-shot the entire raid fast, so sign up for a quick clear. But that title lost all of its meaning. I see so many people try to say AOTC lead or 4-9 mythic, like that means absolutely anything because this is heroic and you're not going to raid lead anything in this raid. I think like maybe 1 out of the 20 groups I join, someone would actually type something in the chat. You don't have to have any comps with the bosses if you know them. They're very, very easy. I want it to be how it used to be where I can easily find a good group, join it so I can clear it without a pain. I don't understand what it is about the raid, but no one can down Smolderon. For some reason, this is the worst boss for pugs, and it's not even that hard. I mean, if people really wanted an easy time, they would just do it as a 10-man, but every pug tries to do like 30 for some reason on this boss. WoW content. I could upload high dungeons, boss guides, and stuff like that, but so many people do the same thing. I was blessed that so many people liked my enhancement shaman video and thought this would be a great way to keep it going. But as time went on, less people watched, so I felt worse about uploading. I like the idea of providing helpful tips, but not enough people view it for the amount of time I put into some of them. I play a couple of different classes, and honestly, the one thing I didn't mind was some people asking me to review their logs. I didn't mind helping people with their rotations if I knew the class. Same thing with dungeons. It was one of my pet peeves that people loved to use invis pots in 20s. And I wanted to make videos like, dude, you don't need an invis pot in a 20. I also had a Blood DK join my 20 key about a week ago, and we didn't have a hero class in the group. And he goes, I don't know about that, and leaves. Like, you don't need heroism for a 20. I really wish I could address the public about certain tips and things you don't really need to do. Just like every group was plagued with god comp and augs, which didn't matter in 20s either, but now I'm straying way too far from the main topic. The reason for mythic rating partly was for content. Occasionally someone will watch the polls and I'll talk to them, but it's not enough to keep me wanting to do it. I wish people enjoyed watching my guild raid because sometimes we're pretty chill, but not a lot do. If I was in a top guild, I can post like the first X class boss kill POV, but I'm not. Same thing for dungeons. I'd always love to stream me trying to pug high keys, but I'm just unknown and it's hard to get into keys. So it's hard for me to want to keep playing this game. Is trying to make content in this game worth all the time that I'm investing? I just wish I was having more fun raiding. Sometimes we'll all have a blast and it's a great time. Other times people will get angry at others and wiping on the same boss for weeks sucks. To the point where I think mythic raiding is more of a pain than fun. I've always wished my guild was able to re-clear mythic like we re-clear heroic. I think if we were able to achieve that goal every season and clear with a couple different alts, it could have been a lot of fun, but unfortunately my guild only does one clear. I also wonder if it would have been better if we raided more nights. It takes us an entire pass cycle, so around 5 to 7 months to clear the entire raid, and it's pretty exhausting. 2 nights a week is barely enough to get cutting edge each season. I wish I could finish the raid early so I can take a break in between patches. I feel like the only reason the raid is tuned to be this difficult is to keep the average player playing longer. My guild has some decent players and some that are alright. I know there are tons of guilds out there that are probably the same. It really sucks when you're doing your best and so are they, but you have that 1 or 2 guys in your guilds who are just slower to pick up on the mechanics. You could say, why don't you just find other people? Well, it's because I enjoy everyone in my guild and would rather play with them. And you could also say, well, if you want to raid more, then you can just join a different guild. I mean, I could, but it's not going to decrease the overall time of progression it would take to finish the raid. I guarantee there will always be players in every guild that are slower to pick up on the flow of the fight than others, and that won't change. Even if I was able to get into a top 10 guild, I don't know if I'd even like it, because they require a lot of commitment to be in them. The only way I would consider doing that is if it's somehow led for content that people want to watch. I would raid every day, all day like the Erase the World of First People if I could, but it's not sustainable if there's no support for it. So for that reason is why I stay in my guild and enjoy playing with everyone. To complete Mythic Raid, it takes around 60 to 80 hours, not to mention all the weekly reclears. Most games are like 10 to 20 hours of new content. So you're telling me I'm going to be in the raid clearing the same boss for 70 hours. That's why I'd rather have the time down to like 20 to 30 hours for a full clear. To me, it doesn't really matter how much time, but the problem arises with finding 19 other people who could find the time to raid on the same nights. Then you run into subs and then new people learning the fights, and maybe someone is lagging or someone is late, so there's less time. That's the hard part with my guild, and I'm assuming it could be the same for a lot of other people out there. I don't think I mind the difficulty of some of the mechanics, but sometimes I feel like bosses are just ruined by how difficult one mechanic is or how many of them there are. Tendril, for example, the seed mechanic was over the top and Blizzard took weeks to fix it. Was it doable? I mean, yeah, it was, but at some point it will start to get frustrating. Like, one-shot mechanics like that, or mechanics where one person can wipe you are somehow still present, even though Blizzard said they would get rid of those mechanics. Sure, I can do the mechanic, but can the other 19 pick up on it as fast? From the tank POV, you usually don't have to do much, so a lot of the time you're waiting around for all 18 people to understand the fight and do it properly. I'm fine if it's really difficult for the first week of raiding for the race, but I think it should be nerfed after that, or maybe have like 10 people raid size, or have it scale so it's easier for people to manage mechanics. I actually think raiding is pretty easy, but the hard part is having 20 people find the time to raid together, as well as 20 people learning the mechanics. And performing their best at all times is a lot to ask. Let's say you have a 10 boss raid. I think the first boss should be like 1 to 3 pulls and a loop pinata. 2 to 6 should be 5 to 10 pull count max average, then 7 to 8 is like 20. 9 is 100 pulls, and the last is 100 to 200. I do not think a boss should be progged for 500 pulls, unless there are less bosses in the raid, meaning maybe there's only 7 bosses in a raid, and 1 to 5 or 5 pull bosses, 6 is 50, and then the last is really hard but doable. It's no factor of RNG, it's just a long fight with a lot of overlaps to learn, and that is what I like. I think that's why Tendril, Farok, Razageth, and Sark was really fun, because you get to feel yourself progressing throughout the boss. Not a, oops, I misclicked and wiped the raid. You can also look at this by lowering boss health to have faster kill times, because a lot of the fights are like Smolderon, are the same mechanics as in Rage, which is pretty boring. On top of some of the mechanics, we're lucky there are people out there that can make advanced weak orders to deal with them. I think it's absolute horrible design if you create a boss with a mechanic with no easy solution to solve the problem. That way we were forced to use another program to do it for us. Blizzard hated this idea so much that they made private auras because they wanted people to stop using weak auras. That's not a solution. You either make it so you can give players a way to deal with the mechanic, or you don't tune it to be impossible. I swear, the way they tune the bosses and mechanics, they just guess. They're like, damn, this is really tough. No one on our team can do it, but I kind of want to see if these players can do it and overcome it. And they just implement it with no rationality. Some people in my guild would want to play their own class, but are locked into some other ones because you need almost one of every class for each boss for buffs. I wish they would tune the raid to be easier to where you don't need buffs or you can't rely on Master Spell or Warlock Gates. I actually want to know how Blizzard expected some people to do mechanics if Warlock Gates didn't exist. Did they have another idea in mind? I swear, sometimes people come up with cook strats such as the bubble strat on Sark, so its mechanics never gets nerfed because people cheese it. I just wish you can play what you like versus what you have to do. I want to know, truthfully, without these classes in mind, I want to know how Blizzard thought people would deal with these mechanics. I feel like they are so unforgiving, and then people come up with a solution that maybe wasn't even the solution that Blizzard intended, but it worked, so people just do it. I wonder if some people do mythic raiding because they feel like it's the only way to truly achieve the feeling of completion of a patch, and it's also something to do. They are being forced to do it, and they don't really want to. Does everyone really enjoy mythic raiding to the very end? This point really is for the race people, but they probably spend a lot of money in the race buying gear and having helpers. Shouldn't Blizzard take this as a sign these people are running heroic 40 times before starting mythic, maybe that's a bit much. They use so many resources to pay all these helpers, especially they have to pay their own players. If the race didn't receive this much viewership, I guarantee everyone would stop doing it. As long as they see positive income, then it's worth, but I think a lot of guilds are starting to realize that it takes too much resources to do this. Too much money to be a world first guild, too much time to get everyone there to do it. So this was a lot longer than I thought it would be, and I feel like each mini point I could have talked about a lot more in detail. There's just been so much I've been thinking about with content in general and WoW lately. Any questions or comments, please put them down below and I'll try to answer them. I just want to enjoy the game, and I don't know if these overly complicated bosses that rely on 20 people playing perfectly is worth it. These bosses are extremely draining. Not only do I have to constantly play my best, I have to hope that 19 other people are playing their best. And sometimes that means waiting 100 pulls for them to pick up on mechanics. To be able to advance and prog a boss quickly, you need every player to be really good. So shout out to Mythic World First people who do it under geared. I do have fun doing Mythic, but after a while you start to feel how much time you've been in raids and doing the same thing. Raids are just too long and demanding for the reward they supply. There really is no reward for completing Mythic anyway, maybe good gear, a title, and achievement. It's almost nothing. Raiding would be more enjoyable if you can quickly finish the raids, that way you can get the better loot. Like for example, I'm playing Feral right now and my Bis comes for Rock, but getting that weapon seems like such a long shot. It's very draining going to raid nights knowing you have to rely on 19 other players on top of myself to play well, and then you also have to hope that there's no one late or no one's lagging or whatever the other case might be. For the future of my content with WoW, maybe I'll put out a high key or a raid boss every now and then. In terms of will I keep playing, I'm really on the fence. I might still play heroic and do dungeons within the patch, but I'm not sure on mythic. I'm probably just going to do it just to do it, but will I fully enjoy it? Who knows? Currently, there might be some people in my guild that are stepping away for War Within. I dislike the idea of trying to bring in new players unless they're amazing people. Currently, we will hopefully finish this tier because I really want that owl skin from a druid and might keep pushing IO every now and then, but I'm not too sure. I'm at the point where it's getting hard to plug keys and it's hard getting my push group together. I have some thoughts on dungeons as well. I might talk about them if this does well, but the biggest takeaway here is I hate the idea of people raiding that don't want to be there but feel obligated to. Dragonflight was good for what it was, but raiding is too much for casual players. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the content so far because we're in a drought to War Within. I'm hoping Faded will be good, but I'm not sure. Good luck in your future WoW endeavors. I do apologize for the video being long as shit. It was a long ass script and I don't know. I literally just mashed a lot of shit together and wish I could have made it sound better too. There was just so much on my mind that I could have just I could have literally just recorded myself talking and I could spend an entire day. I gotta get so sidetracked. I do apologize for the video being this long, but yeah, if I recorded this naturally, not scripted based, like I could have sidetracked and got lost in so many different areas. So that's why I say comment if you want. I'll try to comment back depending. So many different topics and stuff to talk about. Potentially, maybe I'll make future videos and stuff. I just don't really know what to do. But anyway, thank you for watching and I hope you have a great day.